Good evening, you're watching Mongolian World. I'm your host, Anur Kambatar. And for top stories, protesting continued on Monday. Parliament decided against declaring a state of emergency as protesters dispersed. Prime Minister Oyun-Erdene comments on recent event, and Mongolia completes Chinggis bond repayment. And for the news, stay tuned. On Monday, thousands of protesters in Ulaanbaatar city continued demonstrating in freezing temperatures. The protesters demanded the names of the officials linked to coal smuggling and corruption allegations. Later, some protesters tried to storm the government palace. Details on yesterday's protest are in our next report.
Protesters demanded justice against corrupt officials and called for the country's parliament and cabinet to be dismissed. The demonstration started at Sukhbatar Square, followed by a march to Ichtinger Mountain, where the residences of state officials are located. The entrance to Ichtinger was blocked off by police. Protesters, frustrated with the country's economic crisis, accused government officials and legislators of neglecting their duty to remedy the situation and forcing people to consider leaving the country. The inflation rate in Mongolia has reached a record high this year. With regional and international issues, including Russia's war in Ukraine and China's closed borders, Mongolia's inflation rate has soared to 16%. According to surveys conducted by international NGOs, inflation is impacting people differently depending on their purchasing power. The 16% inflation rate feels like 12.9% for people with higher income, while people with lower income feel inflation at 18%. At 9 p.m. local time on Monday, the police tried to break up the demonstration, but some protesters attempted to storm the government building as no state officials had come out to address the protesters. The Parliament of Mongolia convened an irregular session at around 9 p.m. and discussed declaring state of emergency, which was ultimately decided against. Last month, Mongolia's anti-corruption authority announced the names of more than 30 officials under investigation for coal embezzlement. This announcement came after a report that Chinese officials involved in Mongolian coal smuggling had been executed. The case involved $1.8 billion in unregistered coal exported to China. According to foreign media reports, the Chinese side has sent the names of the Mongolian politicians involved in the case to Mongolian Prime Minister and government officials.
The Prime Minister of Mongolia and Chairman of the People's Party of Mongolia, Oyun-Erdene, held a press conference today to address recent issues.
The Mongolian People's Party Congress was supposed to be held on December 6th, but it was postponed due to the demonstration at Sukhbatar Square. On Tuesday, a meeting of the Administrative Board of MPP was held. According to some sources, the board discussed calls to dissolve the parliament and hold parliamentary elections in 2023 and a proposal to amend the constitution. Later, the Prime Minister held a press conference with the head of the Cabinet Secretariat, Amr Baysalyan, and Minister of Economic Development, Khurel Batar.
20 demands from the protesters have been received. Summarizing the demands, there are demands from 14 civil society organizations and the rest are demands from other entities. Summing up the demands, one major issue is the issue of justice. Development Bank's debt is being paid today, the Chinggis bond as well. The bond was raised so that the next generation would repay it. The issue of foreign debt has stifled Mongolia's development. We fought a difficult situation in terms of accountability. Looking back, it was announced from this room in this chamber that the issue of the Oyun-Erdene agreement was transferred to arbitration.
During the briefing, he announced that the Chinggis bond debt had been fully repaid. Before the press conference, the Prime Minister signed an order authorizing the Minister of Finance to transfer the remaining $136 million of Chinggis bond debt. As a result, Mongolia has completed the repayment of the $1.5 billion Chinggis bond.
Thank you for staying with us. Now let's take a look at the currency exchange rates provided by Mongol Bank. International Volunteer Day is marked every year on December 5th. On Monday, the Australian Volunteers Program in Mongolia organized the event in the Ulaanbaatar Hotel. Australian volunteers and representatives of the partner organizations attended the event. Details from BMSurung Achurat.
The theme of this year's celebration is Solidarity through Volunteering. This theme highlights the Australian Volunteers Program's unique strength as a program and organization that exists to promote and enable volunteerism, harnessing the very best of humanity to work side by side with local communities and progress truly sustainable, positive change.
Australia is very, very proud to have supported volunteers around the world for over 60 years. We've supported 16,000 volunteers across the globe. But in Mongolia, we've been very proud as well and very pleased to be able to support Mongolian organisations since 1995. And we've had over 400 Australian volunteers here working in very close partnership with different Mongolian organisations. We have a very strong development cooperation program here with Mongolia. One of those is our Australian Volunteers program, and this is our sort of latest iteration of our volunteering program. It's been going for 5 years now. We're very, very proud to say this is our 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations between Australia and Mongolia. Throughout COVID, we had to obviously reduce the numbers, but we were very, very proud to keep the program going through remote volunteering, and very, very pleased this year that we were able to welcome back 3 more of our in-country volunteers.
The Australian Volunteers Program started the second term of its 10-year design in a more robust, resilient and innovative program than it was at the beginning. Ultimately, the program aims to contribute to partner countries' sustainable and equitable socio-economic development. Over the next 5 years, the program aims to deliver the following 3 outcomes. First, partner organizations are supported to progress their development objectives. Second, key stakeholders in Australia and partner countries appreciate the value of volunteering. And third, program participants gain greater cultural awareness and build stronger connections across countries.
This Australian Volunteers Program is a 10 years design we had. We started in second, fifth year this year with more robust, more innovative, more resilient, which I mean that during the pandemic, sometimes it was difficult to have volunteers coming in the country. So we started remote volunteering, but this year we're starting as a hybrid, which means that Australians will be coming to Mongolia, then will be going back and working remotely, which is giving a seamless continuation of the placement in Mongolia from Australia. So it's Australian professionals, which means skilled Australians are coming to work in Mongolia for government, non-government and state universities in Mongolia. So which is basically giving a skill exchange, knowledge exchange to build the capacity of the organization and contribute to the development objectives of the partner organizations we have in the country.
This year, to celebrate International Volunteer Day, they have focused on how people find purpose through volunteering. COVID-19 has reminded them to reflect on what gives them purpose.
We received several sign language interpreter training curriculum around the world, for example, Australia, New Zealand, and England, how they train sign language interpreters. Comparing the sign language interpreter training curriculum, we have compared our own sign language interpreter training curriculum. So starting this February, in Mongolian government initiated and established the first interpreter training program at a professional training institute.
International Volunteer Day is an opportunity for the Australian Volunteers Program to celebrate their volunteers and partners that they work alongside. It is also a chance to promote the contribution international volunteering makes to locally led sustainable development and the rich cultural exchange that comes with that.
Development programs to Mongolia during
Here's the international news from our partner agencies. Western countries on Monday began imposing a $60 per barrel price cap and ban on some types of Russian oil, part of new measures aimed at stepping up pressure against Moscow over its war on Ukraine.
The European Union, along with Australia, Britain, Canada, Japan, and the United States, agreed to the price cap on Friday. Speaking in Poland, the European Commissioner for the European Green Deal, Frans Timmermans, said the goal was to reduce the income Putin gets from his oil, which is used to finance his barbaric war. Timmermans was visiting Poland's southern coal mining region of Silesia and will be discussing Poland's green energy transition.
On the price that was set, we are between two things. We want to reduce the income Putin gets from his oil because he's financing his barbaric war with it and all the atrocities the Russians are committing in Ukraine. And at the same time, also in a close dialogue with our transatlantic partners, they are also asking of us, and we agree, that we should not disrupt international oil markets. That would not help us either. So then you come to the conclusion, collectively as member states, that 60 euros would be the right price to set. So these are the two considerations that are being taken into account.
To a level for Russian budget. Any comments on this?
On your first question, we remain open for dialogue. We want this dialogue to be successful because regardless of our political differences, we want Europe to be able to invest for the benefit of the Polish people. We want to do this for the Polish people. But you will not be surprised that the minimal condition for this is respect for the rule of law, respect for the rulings of the European Court of Justice. It is not too much to ask that of a government, I would say. So I hope we can come to an understanding. The dialogue is ongoing, and I hope we can have a positive result.
On Monday, Timmermans said the European Commission approved all 5 Just Transition Fund plans for Poland, which means that now €3.85 billion or $40 billion is available for these 5 regions to transform themselves into very productive, high-level jobs industrial regions.
Participation.
Now let's take a look at our regular feature on sports. Cuban women athletes in boxing gyms are celebrating the authorities' decision to allow them to compete for the first time following the announcement on Monday. Boxers like Legnis Kalamasa, 31, said this is the day she's been waiting for since she started to box 7 years ago. Cuba is known worldwide for boxing, home to many legendary male boxers and owner of dozens of Olympic medals in the sport. Felix Savon, Teofilo Stevenson, and Julio Cesar Le Cruz are amongst the most renowned. But the island has also sparked controversy by not allowing women to compete, despite permitting them to do so in other contact sports like taekwondo and wrestling. Perhaps most notably in 2009, the former head coach of Cuba's men's team, Pedro Roque, told a group of journalists that Cuban women are there to show their beautiful faces, not to take hits. It was a sentiment Kalamasa and other women who have embraced the sport have rejected as they've sought to change the rules. Kalamasa began boxing in Havana with just one other woman, spending long hours training despite being turned away by many coaches and boxing rings. With time, interest in boxing among women has only grown. On Monday morning, Cuban officials announced in a press conference that they were doing just that, explaining they would hold a competition of 42 women boxers in mid-December to choose 12 athletes for a women's team. The team, they said, will compete in the Central American and Caribbean Games in El Salvador, their first international debut. The competition will be a first step towards the 2024 Olympic Games in Paris. Women were first allowed to box in the Olympics in 2012. Kalamasa, who now trains with 5 other women, hopes the decision means their community will only grow. The announcement comes shortly after Cuban boxers made a comeback in May in Mexico, while male boxers competing on an international stage for the first time in 60 years. 22-year-old Giselle Bala Garcia, who boxed alongside Kalamasa after having only started boxing 1 year earlier for exercise, said the news offers them a chance to show what they are made of. Brazil is through the quarterfinals after a convincing 4-1 victory over South Korea in the round of 16. Croatia and Japan, after 120 minutes of play, were locked at 1-1 and needed the tournament's first penalty kick shootout to decide the winner. Croatian goalie Dominik Livakovic saved the first 2 kicks from Japan to give his team a huge advantage. The Selecao did the majority of its damage in the first half. Vinicius Jr., Neymar, Richarlison and Lucas Paqueta all found the back of the South Korean net during the first 45 minutes of action. Despite the insurmountable deficit, the South Koreans came out in the second half and showed a lot of fight. They opened the half on the attack, and early shot from Son Heung-min had to be turned away by Brazil's goalie Alisson. Brazil also showed little signs of letting up. In the 55th minute, South Korean goalie Kim Seung-gyu came up with a diving fingertip save to keep the Brazilians from getting their 5th goal. In the 76th minute, South Korean finally got one back. Park Seung-ho smashed a screamer from outside the box that denied Brazil the clean sheet. In the shootout, Croatian goalie Dominik Livakovic stepped up in a big way. He saved the first 2 kicks from Japan to give his team a huge advantage. He then saved a third on Japan's 4th attempt, and Croatia made 3 out of their first attempts to seal it. Maria Pesalic converted the winning penalty to seal the 3-1 victory. In the 43rd minute, Japan's Daisuke Maeda converted Ritsudoan's corner for the opener. The Samurai Blue went into the half up 1-0. Croatia answered in the 55th minute through the Ivan Perisic's header. The match headed to extra time tied at 1 after neither side converted again. Croatia were prolific in extra time in 2018, advancing on penalties in the World Cup round of 16 and quarterfinal. They won their 2018 semi-final match in extra time, and Croatia finished second in the 2018 World Cup, losing to France in its final. Japan was seeking its first ever men's World Cup quarterfinals after winning Group E with notable victories over Germany and Spain. Brazil will face Croatia on Friday in the quarterfinals. Here's the weather forecast of all major cities. Well, that's all for today, and thank you for staying with us. We'll see you tomorrow with news and updates. Have a nice evening. Goodbye.